and welcome to the ESG Mena podcast. I'm your host, Madaline Dunn, and today I'm delighted to say we're joined by Seb Alex, who is a vegan activist, lecturer, photojournalist, and founder of the Middle East Vegan Society. Seb, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, no, it's a pleasure. So just sort of jumping right in, I think to begin with, it would be great to sort of hear about your journey into veganism and activism as well, and sort of what was the catalyst behind that?
So I always considered myself an animal lover. Let's say I had a friend who pointed out my hypocrisy when it came to how I acted towards my cat, and how at the same time I was eating animals and also going hunting. And I didn't like her pointing that out, so we started arguing, and she said, you know what, let's stop arguing. I'm going to show you a video 10 minutes long, and then we'll see how you feel about it. So she showed me a video called Meat Your Meat. It's a basic standard industry practice from all around the world of what happens to animals. When I finished watching what happens to these animals in farms and slaughterhouses, I thought I should be able to find a really good argument now as to why I want to continue contributing to what I just saw, because I didn't want to give up eating animal products, and that was 17 years ago, and I still haven't found or heard of a good argument to try to justify what we're doing to other animals. So at the time I became vegetarian out of lack of more information, let's say, and then 8 years later I became vegan, so I've been vegan for 8 or 9 years now. And that was because I realized more about what happens to all animals in all industries, not only in the meat and chicken flesh industry, but also like in the dairy industry, in the egg industry, in leather, all of it. And ultimately learned about what speciesism is, which is an arbitrary discrimination towards other animals based on the species that they belong to, which is not a good argument at all when it's arbitrary. And that's what made me go vegan. And eventually I realized around a year later that, well, actually it's great that I'm vegan, but that's not really doing much to help the other animals, because that's non-participation in the atrocity. It doesn't mean I'm helping them. So it's similar to knowing that an animal is suffering and thinking you're doing enough by not contributing to that suffering. No, that's not enough. We should always try our best to help someone, whether they're a human or another animal, to make sure that they're not suffering. And that's how I got into activism.
Amazing. And just sort of drawing from that as well, it would be great to sort of hear about how you went about sort of founding the Middle East Vegan Society, and sort of I know that activism is clearly a drive towards through a lot of this, but sort of the motivations behind sort of founding it in the Middle East specifically.
Yeah, so I've been active at least for around 6 or 7 years, and I was like using most of my time to do grassroots activism, so street activism. I organized activism events or attended activism events, eventually started giving workshops and lectures as well in universities and schools around the world. And when I'm visiting Lebanon, which is where I'm born and raised, because I'm not based there now, I usually join events organized by Lebanese vegans, a local community, a local animal rights organization. And when we started getting closer and doing more and more events, I really liked the idea that there's a group there doing this, but the way Lebanese vegans functions is at a very grassroots level. And I thought it's very amazing because grassroots is very important, but it's also important to have something more regional and something more corporate as well. And I wanted to address different things as well. So I thought, well, how about we start a Middle East Vegan Society to raise awareness about animal rights and veganism in all of the regions, so in the Mena region, Middle East and North Africa, by using educational approach, of course, but also creating content in Arabic, which is one of the top 5 most spoken languages in the world. And there's very limited information out there about veganism and animal rights in Arabic. So we wanted to cover that while also bringing in about this community that already exists, so like connecting the different groups, whether it's in Jordan or Syria or Palestine or Iraq or the UAE or Saudi Arabia or Egypt or Lebanon. So creating this network so that everyone is aware that you're not the only one in the region. There's actually a network of activists throughout all these countries. And so there's that aspect and there's a corporate aspect, which is reaching out to businesses in the food and beverages industry or establishments and organizations to try to get them to make it easier for consumers to make more sustainable and ethical and healthier choices by putting plant-based options on their menus or making them cheaper or making them plant-based by default and things like that. So we're really trying to target both the educational part and the corporate part to make sure we have a big impact in the whole area.
Right, and I'd love to come back to that latter point in a moment, but first I'd just sort of like to ask about how the reception has been to the founding of the organisation and some of the work that you do, and also how the term vegan translates as well into sort of the Mena region and the languages that are spoken there, and sort of what the landscape is looking like for veganism within the Middle East.
Well, it's actually one of the places where we're seeing the highest numbers of people joining the movement, let's say, or at least becoming vegan or plant-based for different reasons, of course. One thing that we know based on the studies that we have and the research that we have and the data research that we have is that more and more people are adopting plant-based diets in the region. And when it comes to how people view the idea of plant-based eating and veganism or reducing meat intake, reducing dairy intake, it's more favorable in the Middle East and Africa than the rest of the world, which is a very interesting finding that we found out when we looked into the market research. The way people have perceived it so far, we've been in touch with a lot of organizations, and honestly, it's just a lot of excitement whenever we collaborate with one, and we've collaborated with many, Lebanese vegans included, of course. It's just a lot of excitement and a lot of appreciation for what we're doing, because we are trying to highlight the work of the activists in the area, which unfortunately happens to be a blind spot of the vegan movement. Nobody really talks about what's happening in the Middle East. Things that are taking place in the Middle East or North Africa when it comes to activism and veganism do not get as much coverage and support and appreciation as they would have if they happened, let's say, in Europe or North America. And so we're trying to also create a platform where people can actually know who are the activists on the front line, who are the groups that are doing this. Also because new vegans can then know, like, oh, there's actually a group in my area, so I can go and join and help them out. So there's just a lot of appreciation and excitement, and we're just very happy to be doing that work.
It sounds like a really sort of collaborative effort with lots of different people. And I'd like to go back a little bit as well, just to talk about some of your work as a photojournalist. I know that in your work you've captured some really horrifying images of what goes on behind the scenes in in factories, producing meat and dairy, I wanted to ask you why you think it's important for people to see those images and sort of the impact that you hope that it will have.
Yeah, I think it's very important, because if you're paying for it directly, then it's your responsibility to know what you're paying for. It's the least that you should do if you're paying for a product. Like if I'm paying for anything and you come and tell me this is the impact of your choices, it would be very dishonest of me to turn a blind eye to it. And so we also know that the industry does a lot of effort in making sure that those who are documenting what's going on face legal charges and are having trouble, legally speaking. So that's a very good hint that the industry doesn't want this, because they know it affects consumers, because consumers actually care. Most people believe that they care about what happens to other animals, but most people are also the reason why other animals are suffering in unimaginable numbers. So I think it's our responsibility as animal rights activists, for those who have the opportunity and the space for it, to actually go into these places and document what happens, because it's, for many of us, it's how we changed as well when we saw the impact of our choices. And so when you know you're causing a specific amount of suffering and you know you have another option, then it's good for you to also, after making the change, raise awareness about that problem for other people to also make the change. We kind of owe it to the animals that we've already harmed. And so I believe it's more of a moral responsibility. And the way I hope that people would react is, obviously, you know, they get shocked and they think like, oh, like some people say like, oh, you're playing with emotions. And it's like, well, if you're reacting in an emotional way, what does that tell you about what you're doing? You know, if there's nothing wrong with it, then why do you mind? Or if there's nothing wrong with it, then why do you look away? Why don't you want to watch these videos? So I think my hope is that people see it and then take responsibility for what they're doing and actually feel accountable and then act on it. Not just get upset, not just turn around, just actually act on it.
Yeah, it's that sort of cognitive dissonance of you know, people identifying as animal lovers, but then, you know, consuming animal products. And I know you just said that sort of the MENA region, the Middle East, seem to be sort of potentially driving some of the interest in veganism and the sort of space that's getting most enthused about it. But what is that sort of meat paradox, the sort of cognitive dissonance like in the Middle East and the sort of wider MENA region? Sort of how embedded is that?
I think just like anywhere else in the world, it's quite existing. One challenge that we have is the religious aspect for it. So being a region that is heavily populated by the religion of Islam, like followers of the religion of Islam, a lot of people have a misunderstanding of what it means when it comes to religion. A lot of people think that it would be against their religion to adopt a plant-based diet. So we are actually working on a very comprehensive research, like a big project, the Vegan Islam Initiative. It's prepared by Muslim activists from the MENA region, and it goes through all the scriptures, everything related to Islam and eating animals or harming animals or killing animals, to show that not like plant-based diets are not only they do not only go in line with the religion, but they, in many cases, they're also favorable, because we can see through the scripture that many, many times the prophet or the stories that we hear about the prophet always preferred not harming animals over harming animals. Whenever there was an option, that was always made very clear in countless stories. So that's one thing that is considered a challenge. So we're working on this initiative now. It will be published in English and Arabic, not only for the MENA region, but for Muslims all around the world, to know that it's completely fine to be vegan and a religious person. There's nothing wrong in it. And if anything, scripture also shows that the prophet's diet was also predominantly plant-based anyway. Back in these days, it was very rare for people, not very rare, but depending on their socioeconomic background, people didn't really eat that much like animal-based foods. So we're just trying to clear out that confusion and raise awareness about it in an educated way. And it's being done by Muslim activists who are also vegan, so we're really excited for it.
Yeah, I mean, that feels really important as well, to have people who are living in the region and, you know, following that religion to sort of be leading the way and sort of bringing it from their own perspective. Yeah. And I know you said a moment ago as well about some of your other initiatives, sort of working with businesses in the food and drink industry. And I'd love to hear a little bit more about sort of your corporate outreach program that you're sort of beginning now. And sort of what that's going to look like, how it's going to evolve.
Yeah, so we're really excited. I haven't shared this anywhere yet, but I'll share it with you and the listeners. We're actually teaming up with an amazing organization based out of the States. It's called Greener by Default. And their mission is to basically do this corporate outreach in a way where they make a lot of the options in restaurants or cafes or university cafeterias be always greener by default, as in vegan or plant-based by default. And the way they do this is they reach out and they share all the data and all the research to show people that, hey, this is better for the environment, better for the health of your consumers, better financially speaking as well, because most of these places only care about financial gain. And so we're teaming up with them because they are an amazing organization and very successful at what they do. Just to give you a very quick example, they recently managed to get the San Francisco, I believe, offices of LinkedIn, the company, to switch all of their coffee orders in their company to be made with oat milk by default. And the majority of people, they have the option to change to cow milk. The majority of people, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, it was more than 70% of people, they just leave it like that. They don't mind, but they usually don't want to do the effort. So we're very happy to team up with them, and they're going to be helping us out with this project of reaching out to restaurants and cafes in the MENA region. I believe we're going to start mostly in the United Arab Emirates, so Dubai and Abu Dhabi mostly, because of the amount of businesses already promoting plant-based options or plant-based diets.
Right.
So we know we already have the upper hand. We know that the government of the UAE this year has announced that it's the year of sustainability. And so it is in their best interest to offer sustainable options to their consumers, to their customers as well. So that's one thing we're working on. We're also working on starting quite soon, hopefully, on a project of dietary guidelines outreach. So that would involve being in touch with the Ministry of Health. I believe we will start with the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia in KSA to reach out to the Ministry of Health and share all the information and all the data about plant-based diets and diets where, let's say, it's predominantly plant-based, or just eating more plants in general, by sharing the health aspect and see if they can change the dietary guidelines, because that's something very important. So that's another project we have. We haven't started yet, but we're doing all the research to go forward with it.
Wow. So really sort of just making it as accessible as possible, giving people the tools they need to be able to start their journey, making it easier, more straightforward. Yeah. Oh, fantastic. And I know sort of you mentioned about some of the corporations who, the main drive is financial, it's sort of monetary gain. And so I would like to ask you about sort of the shift of the way that products are advertised as plant-based rather than vegan now. I feel like that's definitely something that we're beginning to increasingly see in the way things are advertised. And sort of, what your thoughts are on that, and whether you feel like it's, potentially undermining the core roots of veganism by making it more of a dietary sort of a dietary focus rather than a movement, a way of life.
Yeah, I think it's completely fine to refer to meals and options as plant-based rather than vegan. I believe it's almost a mistake, and I'd make this mistake myself, of referring to food as vegan, whereas the right term should be vegan-friendly, because veganism itself is a philosophy against the exploitation and harm caused on other animals. And so food cannot be vegan, but it can be friendly, like vegan-friendly, as in for those who follow a vegan lifestyle or the philosophy of veganism. Data also shows that people are more likely to purchase these products when the word vegan is not on it, because people freak out when they see the word. So it's very interesting. And I think ultimately we can talk about what's the right thing to do in different situations, but I hold the belief that it's not about what's right, but what's effective, because you may be right, but if you're not helping other animals because you're not being effective, then you're wasting your time and resources. So I'm fully on board with doing whatever is most effective, and it seems that using the term plant-based or plant-exclusive is the most effective way of doing this.
I guess for a lot of people as well, it's sort of perceived as a more inclusive term, rather than seeing a product as vegan. Oh, that's not for me, sort of thing, and completely overlooking it. Sort of creating more interest in, or intrigue in what plant-based can be.
I mean, the data shows that the biggest consumers of plant-based products are not vegans or vegetarians. It's flexitarians, which is a term to describe those who eat a diet consisting of all types of foods, including animal-based foods, but also most of the time try their best to eat plant-based as well. It may be most of the time due to health or sustainability-related reasons.
And sort of drawing from that as well, the sort of flexitarian, the rise of the flexitarian that we're sort of seeing now, where people sort of dabble. What are your thoughts on the sort of the move towards cultivated or sort of cell-based meat? And again, do you see that as something that's making a more vegan-friendly way of life accessible? Or what are your thoughts there?
So it blows my mind that we have to go that far for people to stop killing animals, to be honest. It blows my mind that we have to spend so much time and resources, financial of course, to come up with this technology of growing cell-based meat so that people stop killing animals and eating them because of taste pleasure. That's what it comes down to. At the same time, I know it's going to bring a massive change, a lot of positive results. Like if the majority of the existing animal-based foods in the market are replaced with cell-based meat, that's gonna result in a massive number of animals not being bred and killed. And so that's good. So I'm all for it. It blows my mind that we have to go that far, because it is a fact that existing plant-based burgers do taste the same as meat. I'm not saying that because I want to promote any, but I've had multiple non-vegan friends try them, some of them without even knowing and not realizing that it's actually a plant-based patty, let's say. I've had people know it and try it and tell me that they just don't understand how something can taste exactly like meat. So I'm not saying it as a vegan, I'm saying it as someone who saw people try it and then realize it. So once it's there, these options, and they are healthier options than cell-based lab-grown meat, I don't understand why people don't just consume that. I think it comes down to just being stubborn that no, it has to be real animal flesh. And so scientists were like, all right, then I guess we'll just grow real animal flesh. There's one thing that was a big concern, which was a type of, I forgot what the term was, but it's basically, if I'm not mistaken, the blood of an unborn calf that would have to be used. Bovine something serum, the term I forgot. So that was always a condition. They needed that in order to grow lab-grown meat. And some companies have actually been able to stop relying on it. So that makes it now fully, let's say, cruelty-free. There's no animals involved anymore. And just this morning, I forgot the name of the company, but one company actually got FDA approval for their lab-grown meat. So that's a very, very big step. I know, for example, in Singapore, they already serve lab-grown fish, if I'm not mistaken. But the US taking the lead in this, at least in the Western world, might mean that there's a big change coming. So I personally, I wouldn't eat it. I don't see the point. I don't crave it. It's still going to be unhealthy. Not as unhealthy as, obviously, meat that was, let's say, produced by actually killing an animal. But it's still going to be meat. So it's still going to have cholesterol and everything else. So I have no interest in it. But if it's going to be effective in lowering the number of animals that are being bred and killed, then let it be.
And I can imagine that that's probably the point of view of a lot of vegans, that it will be sort of a product that helps capture that other side of the market that's sort of, like you said, a little bit more stubborn or reluctant to try plant-based. And I'd also like to talk a little bit about sort of how animal agriculture relates to climate change, and also sort of how it's still predominantly being left out of climate change conversations. And I know COP27, a lot of people were disappointed with the lack of focus on animal agriculture. And I was just wondering how you sort of see the situation evolving, especially sort of in the lead up to COP28, and whether you sort of foresee that being more on the agenda.
I mean, the problem is that they're using a lot of financial ways to lobby government officials, even scientists sometimes, to make them not write about the impact of animal agriculture in their reports. It's mind-blowing. It's such a big industry that they have an infinite amount of resources they can use to make people remove certain statistics, certain data, or actually just go like, oh, like, don't mention this, or here's this much money, please take this part out. It blows my mind that they're even allowed to do that, and they do it, and they get away with it. And there was a study out of, I believe, Oxford University, biggest study ever done on different diets and their impact on the environment. And the lead author of the study said that eating a plant-based diet and plant-exclusive diet, so a vegan diet, is the best thing you can do for the environment when it comes to like personal action, the best action you can take, more than cutting down on your flights and more than buying an electric car. And this was a study that I believe used around 40,000 farms from 130 countries or something like that. Biggest study ever done. It wasn't like financed by PETA or Mercy for Animals or Middle East Vegan Society. It was an actual study, and so the data is there, and people want to now talk about regenerative agriculture and things like that. But it's like there is no such thing as sustainable animal products. Just think about how much resources is needed to grow an animal, like breed that animal, grow the animal, and then kill them, and then like use the product. That's going to be a lot of water. Animal agriculture is the leading cause of water depletion, soil erosion, species extinction, deforestation in the Amazon rainforest, #1 cause. So many problems that we face today. Greenhouse gas emissions, more greenhouse gas emissions than all of transportation combined, including planes and boats and everything you can imagine. So the fact that they're not talking about it at these conferences should make us wonder what the industry is doing for them to be left out of the conversation. Yeah.
And sort of, just sort of lastly, how do you see things progressing? Do you think that there will be sort of any policy shift within the Middle East, or what are you sort of seeing on your side?
So I believe, at least at the moment, the landscape is quite financial and diet-based in the Middle East. We do have a lot of activists that are fighting for the cause of animal rights, but the majority of the change that we're seeing is purely for health, sustainability, things like that. So I can't claim that, let's say, the Middle East and North Africa are leading the movement when it comes to ethics. We're not. We're small in numbers, but there's a lot of change taking place. That's a good thing. The market research is showing a lot of growth when it comes to consumption of these plant-based products. And we know for a fact that people from these areas are more open to, let's say, changing their diet to plant-based diets, at least based on the studies that we have access to so far. And I can only hope that the ethical part also grows, because I want to make it clear that as bad as the environmental aspect is when it comes to animal agriculture, the sustainability aspect of adopting a plant-based diet is not there to make the case for animal rights stronger. It's just there as an extra. The case for animal rights is strong enough to stand by itself. It doesn't have to be the most sustainable thing that you can do for it to be a strong argument. That's just something that we're lucky to have as an extra. Like, it's great. You stop doing this. As a result, you're also going to benefit the environment, and you're also going to be a more like, your impact on the environment is going to be less. So that's an extra. But when it comes to the Middle East, I think one thing we can definitely say is that it's changing a lot. It's changing fast. It's definitely affected from what's happening in the West as well. So it's not completely it's not like we're living in another world. It's actually like a lot of products are imported from Western countries. And that's why also now locally they're producing plant-based milk, plant-based cheese, vegan patties and things like that. So there's a lot of investment taking place. I know, for example, the government of Qatar actually invested in Just Egg, which is an egg replacement company. If I'm not mistaken, it was the government. And so there's a lot of interesting things happening, and I'm very excited to see what more is going to happen. And I can only say that I'm very happy that there's also an existing animal rights community made up of activists who are on the front line saving animals, doing activism, raising awareness about animal rights. So yeah, I'm definitely excited to see all the changes, whether they're on a corporate level or on a grassroots level.
Oh, well, Seb, I feel like we could talk for hours, but I really appreciate you coming on the podcast. It's been brilliant to sort of pick your brain and sort of, yeah, get your insights. And yeah, I was just wondering if you could share with the audience sort of where they can go if they want to learn more about veganism and veganism in the Mena, anything like
sure.
that would be fun.
So our website is MiddleEastVeganSociety.org. I know it's a long name, but it's also an easy name to remember. So it's the MiddleEastVeganSociety.org. Same on Instagram, LinkedIn, and Facebook. It's all Middle East Vegan Society. And any information you need will be found there. We're also creating content in Arabic for those of for those of the listeners who are not very comfortable in English. At least on Instagram, for example, all of our posts are both in English and Arabic, so feel free to send us any questions you might have. If you are from any of these countries in the MENA region, and if you need guidance on finding out whether or not there's an existing group in your country, feel free to reach out. We have been interviewing a lot of the activists from all these different countries, and we can put you in touch with them.
Oh, fantastic. Well, yeah, thank you so much, Seb. It's been a pleasure to have you on the podcast.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Take care.
Thank you.